Hi, everyone. So, good afternoon. I'm Juliet Lavender, a sales manager here at Event Bank. We are happy to have you all here. I know some people are still joining. Today, we want to discuss the future of events in Africa post-COVID-19. As you know, currently, the health crisis has certainly taken a toll on the event industry. And as a result, industry futures landscape is bound to transform. Many conferences and industry events worldwide are being cancelled or postponed. While in-person events will not be replaced entirely after COVID-19, event organizers will have to figure out ways on how to drive revenue through events post this crisis. Uh, to add on to that, event professionals need to look forward into the future and ready themselves for a revival after this crisis. So today we will hear from a diverse panel of experts as they discuss the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on the event industry and all the strategies that they have in place and how they can drive revenue past the crisis. So I'll just dive directly into it. I'll just introduce the panelists and then our CEO will take over. So we have the CEO of Flawless Events, Ms. Yordan Tilahun. We have also with us the CEO and founder of Zuri Events, Ms. Kezi Mkiri. We have the chair lady at Event Managers Association of Kenya, Ms. Zuhura Ogada Odhiambo. And we also have Mr. Harry Hare, who is the publisher and chairman of CIO East Africa. And finally, we have Mr. Glenton de Kock, who is the chief executive officer at Southern Africa Association for the conference industry. That's in South Africa. So I'll hand it over to our CEO, who's also part of the panelists, Mr. Eric Schmidt, who is the CEO and co-founder of Event Bank. So over to you, Mr. Eric.
Thank you, Juliet. All right, well, I'm glad we were able to get everybody on today. We are projected to have more than 300 people online listening to the future of events post-crisis. So just so everybody can get a little bit familiar with some of our guests this morning, afternoon, actually, where you guys are, like to run through everybody's background, the type of events that you've been running, and what have you actually been doing since the lockdown started, and how have you reacted to the current crisis? We'll start in Ethiopia with Yordan.
Thank you, Eric. Good to be on this webinar and see so many familiar faces. So Ethiopia has not gone into a full lockdown so far, and hopefully will not. Our numbers have not been very high either, so both death-wise and infections-wise, we seem to be surviving okay. As far as the events industry, just like everywhere else, we're on a complete standstill. As for Flawless, we shut down our office in mid-March or third week of March, and we started working from home. And we've kind of just been learning on this virtual event platform, what is happening, where is our industry going? Are we really gonna walk away from the live events and really immerse ourselves into the virtual event? So I've been quite happy to hear across the board that live events will not die, but it's just been really interesting to learn about the different platforms that are coming out and just engaging and understanding and learning and practicing to a certain degree on what it means to run a virtual event. How do you engage people? What are some of the platforms that work, especially for our continent, based on the different connectivities that we have, how do we run it? So we've kind of just been learning, watching and running some online webinars of our own.
Great, thanks. Kezi?
Good afternoon, everyone. Really excited to be joining in and having this conversation. Kenya has took the direction. We had massive cancellations. The first government directive hitting hard on the meetings and events industry the very first week of March. And we definitely had significant conferences on the calendar for Nairobi, especially that period. We have to notice the background of the industry that 2018, 2019 had quite a bit of downtime. And so there was a lot of optimism for Q1 2020, a number of conferences booked for the market, and for us at Zuri Events, quite significant bookings, meetings were going to be happening that first quarter of 2020. So we did have cancellations, and one of our major conferences was canceled right when guests were beginning the registration process. So this has been a period to engage a lot of customer engagement, a lot of learning and relearning, reskilling as well for the team, regrouping and rethinking through strategic approaches for our market and our industry in the days to come. Quite a lot of unraveling opportunities. Of course, there are windows and doors that need to be shut and several others that need to reopen. So it's been a window to regroup, refocus, and realign our priorities for the coming months.
Great, thanks, Kazi. Welcome, Glenton.
Just unmute myself there. Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are around the world. So we've probably had the most severe lockdown, as some people are calling it, worldwide. We went into a hard lockdown around about the 27th of March. But in early March already, what we had already noticed was a number of potential cancellations. So we had, with our National Convention Bureau, had gone out with a campaign that basically requests rather postpone, but rather postpone instead of cancelling, which has allowed some of those events still to be on the calendar. We've just come out of a meeting this morning to consider and look at what Q3 looks like, because as of yesterday, we are at what government now terms level 3, which allows much more economic activity and more people have gone back to work. But at the same juncture, we have not yet been given the green light by the South African government to gather. So our work this week or for this particular month of June is to get the green light to gather in either groups of 50 or 100. But our immediate sense is now to save Q4 for the calendar year, and our borders are still closed. So there's a bit of work, and I'm sure I'll share some more of that during the course of the conversation. But I think for us on the continent, we've come out of 60 plus days of a serious lockdown in South Africa.
Great, thanks. Harry?
I guess it's me now.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so we've been affected by like everybody else, and our business is sort of, so we have two sides of the business. We play on both sides of events, where we are events managers, but also we supply event equipment. So one side is the equipment side is completely quiet. In fact, we're looking for a church to donate some of our equipment. I'm just kidding, but yeah, that side of the business is really quiet. On the event management side, on the event side, we sort of took a very quick decision immediately. We realized that it's going to be difficult to have meetings the way we do. So we plunged and started experimenting almost immediately on virtual events and webinars. So that has sort of given us quite some leadway in terms of what every what other organizers and other companies are doing around events. So we've been busy organizing our own events, on virtual events, but also helping other organizations put together their own events. So we've been lucky in that sense that we jumped in, experimented very quickly, and we are starting to see monetization. People have started coming to us to actually sponsor some of our events, and also on the other side to have them put together the events. So that's the journey so far.
That's good news. Zuhura, finally, welcome.
Thank you so much, and nice to see all of you with one bigger focus about which is Event Managers Association of Kenya, has put different event companies together to be able to ensure that we professional events, and we are very much key in the aspect of advocacy and collaboration, fair play, transformation, and of course, professionalism. So our members were heavily hit. I remember when the announcement came is when we were having one of the Kenya Open, and we had a lot of members that hit hard, and some of, and we've seen a lot of job losses in the industry. We've seen a lot of, other than just the redundancies, pay cuts have happened. And, and at the same time, also we've seen a lot of members letting their staff go either on unpaid leave without a bigger focus. 6,000 informal events together. So again, in reference to how much that affects, and we have about 5,800 families that have been affected with that particular consideration. So it's with that of course we are futuristic in seeing how we can revive the event industry, but a lot of things and a lot of our members that are actually set. And if we look at also the event industry, it cuts across different value chain. Conversation the other day with the wedding guys, heavy enough. Sharia House in Kenya has closed applications there. A lot of people are affected even just in the wedding because you can't do it. People, put on new clothes. Weddings we've seen, it's been a trickle effect all the way to the person down. So we've been having conversations with government to be able to see how we can steer clear. A lot has happened. We've seen how the private sector, where we are in, we are heavily working closely with government to be able to that would actually drive us and help us.
All right, well, good. Let's go into a little bit. Harry, I'm going to come back to you. You've been obviously running webinars now. You've transitioned some of obviously your previous offline events into online. For the people that are attending today, what are some of the things that you've learned, and what can you pass on to them with your experience thus far?
Oh man, there's a lot of lessons. First, I think it's just we were lucky in the sense that we have a very targeted audience. So our audience is very known. They're also kind of they're familiar with technology, so it was easy for us to sort of transition them into into virtual events. So that's one thing. So I think it also depends on who the audience is. It depends on who's attending your events or who is sponsoring your events. So that's one thing. The other thing is, I think a lot of it, we didn't know what, we were not so sure. We're not experts in online events or virtual events, but we took a decision to experiment. So we actually experimented a lot. We checked, looked at different platforms that are out there because there's so many platforms that are offering different services. Platforms. So some are, big, expensive. Others are not as expensive. Others are. So you need to look at a lot of these platforms and decide, what works for you. And for instance, when we're doing events for other people, what we quickly saw is one of our clients wanted to have 1,000 people attend the event, but we had never done anything that required us to have licenses for 1,000 people. So you start now getting into cost issues. How much is it? How much would it cost to host 1,000 people as opposed to our normal 300, 400 people? So you have to look at different things and then align them to what you want to do and what your customers want to do. But one thing, and I probably need to say, is I think creating communities around events is now going to be a big thing that all of us need to start thinking about.
That's absolutely right. Absolutely correct. And I guess one thing for you guys as you've gone through that, maybe at the beginning it was a little bit more challenging to get people onto the webinar. Have you guys found, as certainly the months have gone on here, that people are at least now more familiar with the different technologies and how to get on webinars? I know a couple months ago ourselves, when we were running webinars in different places, most people were unfamiliar with the tools and how to get on a webinar. But now, for the most part, without obviously internet connectivity issues, that more people are at least able to do it with ease. I think we lost Harry.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm still here. I think I think so I think people are very unlike physical events, which is very strange. That people have become very patient with event organizers, especially around virtual. In the sense that I think because all of us are all learning and we're learning on the go, and we've sort of, people have sort of allowed us to make a few mistakes as we plan our events, as we organize our events, things that would in other situations would not have been possible. You can imagine a customer paying you and then you get your sound wrong. It would be disastrous, and you'll be in a lot of trouble. But I think people, because even the platforms themselves, they're also learning. You find that if you look at the number of new features that have come into Zoom or come into BigMaker or come into Webinar Jam in the last probably 2 months, it's unprecedented, because they're also working backwards to make sure that different, because there's so much demand and also so much pressure on them to deliver certain features for these platforms. So everybody's learning. But I think from our end is, just that the fact that, you go in, you experiment, and just make it work.
Absolutely. Jordan, through your journey over the period of time, obviously you guys are a little bit different situation there, but as you've been doing your research and putting your own thoughts together, what are some of the things that you've learned that event professionals around the continent might be able to learn from the research that you've gone through and the experiences that you've had thus far?
I think, especially from my experience, as I also log on to different webinars to understand what's happening in the industry, what I've realized is my patience has gone down for the regular talk shop. If there's no value within the conversation in the first 10 minutes, I log out. So what I think we need to keep on top of mind is, especially in a virtual event, the content sells 150%. When we're in live events, you might go to Mauritius because it's a sexy destination, and if the conference is boring, then you can go out and enjoy the weather. But in a live event, if the topic doesn't grab and and your speakers don't bring their A game from within the first 10-15 minutes, then you start losing your audience. So as event organizers, we need to be more conscious on how we bring together our panelists together and the kind of experience we're putting together for the audience. I've learned that, as Harry has said, people are patient, but they're also less so, at least from the audience perspective, if we don't provide them with like a tangible output of what they're going to get. And I think this with that understanding that, the breakout rooms are coming in and people are looking for more engaging activities of online ice breaking, different games that we can do. If you now listen to the industry, it's all about how do we get to an engagement point. Okay, now we're used to the different platforms, we're all looking at each other, we're talking, but as you also start to see more drop-offs, it's like, okay, what are some of the engagement tools that people are coming up with? Are we going to move towards more gamification? What are some of the tools what are some of the live interactivities that we can bring into our webinars? And so I think as organizers, we can no longer take the seat back and say, well, let's slap together a content and I hope people will sign in, but it's more about, are we consciously moving into production that's high quality? Is it grabbing enough? How are we announcing our webinars? How are we making sure that people come on board? How are we bringing value to our sponsors? And are we actually able to show them how we're bringing value to their brand? So I think there's a lot more consciousness and intentionality behind how we need to do these online web events, because otherwise, the more you stay home, the more you burn out, and the less you log on to these things unless they really are relevant to what you want to listen to.
And and the reality is you're on your computer, YouTube, or whatever other platform is one click away. So that engagement is extremely important. Glenton, what are obviously you guys are in a little bit different of a position. What are some of the things that you've noticed that have been successful with how you've been engaging over the last couple months, and as you sort of see things panning out? Obviously you've moved into a new level. How do you think that will change a little bit now moving into level 3?
I think I just want to probably add on to Jordan in terms of content. What we've done is we've hosted as an association, obviously representing quite a large proportion of the business event sector and exhibition sector in South Africa, is to ensure that with the content we have the correct presenter. Because as she rightly said, and I think we've all been sort of on one or two webinars where the person presenting just doesn't look excited, doesn't sound excited, doesn't engage, because you're speaking like I'm speaking into my mobile phone at the moment. You automatically turn off. So I think the key for us in terms of what we're seeing going forward is how do we balance what everybody was calling the hybrid event? How do you balance that as we're pushing to get people to gather in the groups of 50 or 100? How do you ensure that even in that sense, should we have been able to gather as a panelist with yourself in a particular room at a studio? How is that then presented to ensure that people can engage on that level? And I think that's going to be the little transition that takes place. I believe that the technology and a lot of platforms we've seen And I don't want to mention them because they haven't paid me for any commercial airtime on the webinar, but we've seen how they've developed overnight and how as a sector, our industry, our players, our PCOs, even our audiovisual guys have taken to platforms, written programs to ensure that if we had spoken about this a year ago and spoken about a hybrid event, all of us would have said, never going to happen, too much time, technology won't do this. But I think the place at which COVID-19 has forced us to think about our space has allowed us to then consider, as we are within some South African perspective, is so what happens in Q4? Can we have a hybrid event? What is going to be required? Is the connectivity correct? Is the content correct? Is the presenter going to be smart and engaging enough? And I think that's going to be part of how the platforms are set up, because going into like what the world calls this new normal, it's about trust. I think each of us individually, as much as we've moved around and probably want to move around, the desire, as I've always had, I've always hated airports. I've always like timed my flight in the sense that I can run through everything, but I actually miss the airport. Actually miss the fact that you could just be around other people. And I think until that happens, we're going to be challenged as an industry to almost reintroduce how we engage in the knowledge space, and importantly, how do we keep the sector moving forward as well. And I think our challenge from a South African perspective is the fact that, as I said earlier in the introduction, hard lockdown, we're sort of in the middle part now. We're wanting to, and we're allowing more people to move around freely, get the economy started in South Africa. The next stage is how do we then start getting people in a space, in the conference, in a meeting, and also to live events as well. And that's going to be, I think, the one thing that I've seen, particularly within Africa and in some of the other webinars, and particularly South Africa, the resilience of individuals, the ability to think out of the box and think quickly and drive ourselves quickly, is something that I believe the industry will survive through it. Unfortunately, yes, there's many of us that will probably not be part of this. Some companies will not be part of it. But I think for those of us that are keeping the lights on, the clarity has to be that we have to consider the following. And it's a question we've asked ourselves in the last week as an association. So if nobody knew about business events, if nobody knew about exhibitions, how would you introduce that to somebody that's never heard about it before? So if we just landed here on planet Earth, how do we introduce this concept? Because in essence, that's in essence how we have to effectively then rewrite part of what the new normal is going to be. Whether it's around protocols, whether it's around getting people into spaces, but how do we get that right going forward? And I think if we answer that particular question for ourselves as we do as an association, we'll find some comfort in understanding how do we go about it. But I'm clear in the following aspect that the hybrid event is here in the short term, definitely, but long term, as human beings, we feel for contact. We want to have contact, and not to sort of like, I don't prepare a speech here, but just to give some insight. Some of our kids went back to school yesterday, and one little girl, and I felt for one little girl in one of the inserts that I was able to pick up last night. The interviewer asked, like, so how do you feel? She says she's happy to be at school, but it sort of dawned on her immediately that as much as she's happy, she's not able to touch her friends. She's not able to huddle in a particular group, and that reminded me of our industry. All of us, whether we've known each other or not, if you're on this particular content, we're going to give you one big teddy bear hug. And those sort of things are something that we have to adjust to. So I think that we're learning as we're moving through it, Eric, but more importantly, I think we are resilient enough to come out of it on the other side as well.
That's right. We look all forward to that happening. Kezi, you work with different clients, different types of organizations. Can you give us a sense into some of the conversations you're having with your clients or potential clients, as they start looking forward and planning their marketing or event budgets over the next, 6 to 8 months, and how they're thinking about this process as well? I know you participate as well, in RFPs that are out there. Give us a sense of how you see things are changing, and certainly what that will look like for some of those events that your clients are trying to imagine moving forward.
Thank you, Eric. I think obviously the good thing with this, I think on the upside, is that the entire market is not just our industry, but across sectors. Everybody is having to relearn and to unlearn various things that we thought were the normal. So we now see clients, brands getting back to the drawing board and beginning to reimagine how exactly they will engage with their audiences. And I think for a lot of, particularly for us who deal with business events, the experience now is clients beginning to realize how integral the function of event management is and events in general in helping brands interact with their audience, helping them keep conversations going with customers. Face-to-face events have, of course, provided engagement platforms for a very long time. And now we realize that as much as we want to keep brands engaging with their clients, it's not just about going virtual. There's the different factors that, and I think Jordan has really highlighted those. It's not just about going virtual to keep the engagement. It's about knowing how to engage in a relevant manner with audiences. And as we look at the RFPs unfolding, we're seeing clients wanting to forecast, is it virtual in the meantime? Is it going towards hybrid in the next 6 to 8 months? And probably pushing away the thought and the possibility of physical face-to-face meetings to 12 months going forward. There's still a lot of uncertainty for the conferencing market. So we'll probably be seeing that coming around Q1, Q2, in the very earliest of 2021. But Eric, just allow me to highlight a critical factor for corporates right now, and even for us in the industry, particularly for myself and those of us whose sustainability is a core issue, is the fact that virtual delivers to us a new problem, the problem of inclusivity when it comes to the event space. That we have an entire segment. A market like Kenya, we have very, I think, the best on the continent, very high mobile penetration and internet connectivity, but we still have a significant number of would-be attendees who will not be able to engage on virtual. And that is a significant market segment for brands. So figuring out how do we engage with those that are not reachable through the different virtual channels. And so as an industry beginning to rethink how do we handle activations, because that allows brands and corporates to engage with a market segment that will not be able to get virtual. And lastly, for us as event organizers to rethink our role when it comes to informing brands and advising brands on strategic formations and allocations of budget for engagement, that it is not, our role should not be focused on just event production, but I think the strategy of brand engagement, right from the design of, not even the campaigns, the rethinking of how brands generally engage with their audiences. And lastly, like Glenton mentioned, how we deliver value, not just to attendees, but also to sponsors. So as a company is rethinking how do we actually deliver true, tangible, measurable value to our clients? How are we able to deliver a return on investment for every coin that clients are putting to us to organize virtual or hybrid events going forward?
So Her, anything to add to that from your perspective?
Of course, just to add to that, of course, with the disruption that happened in the event industry, it brought in opportunities, that we never thought about, and some people had been using them. We agree, of course, that the hybrid, text even brings you the international visitor into the space, especially the lower income DMCs, the visitors who couldn't afford to come in for an event or the other. And of course, the other part is also understanding that the virtual events deny the economy, the beds, the rooms, the activities that happen, and, so you're not able to see that trickle effect that comes across, which is very critical. But of course, this is a very good time to be able to engage with your clients and be able to see how can you still be able to walk with them the journey and even plan for what's coming ahead. So of course, yes, the hybrid, the virtual have got heavy pluses, and we know about the physical contact being very important in the aspect of even closing business. But it's more to look at, yes, we are growing in the hybrid events, but looking at when everything normalizes, we're looking at how does that complement further. I know opportunities have been there on a revenue generation platform where you can actually drive heavy lead generation from the hybrid, because you've got a targeted audience that you can actually market to. And you can also have sponsorships that can actually be done onto the virtual events that are happening. So opportunities are there, and we have actually been brought up quickly to be able to incorporate that to the client offerings that we have. Of course, looking forward to reviving the industry to be back to complement it.
Great. And Yordan, skills. Obviously, new skills need to be introduced to event professionals. What do you think, some of those new skills really need to be as this whole shift happens and takes place?
I think it's definitely going to be different for every company, but for us, we're looking at, how do we become virtual savvy? How do we become not just event organizers, but also production managers? How do we produce content? How do we bring it together? What are some of the, like I said, engagement tools that are out there? Do we still wait on our clients to ask us to put something together, or are there topics that are so, like, there are burning issues, and it could be just country focused, that we can bring forward to the community to talk about? How do we engage the government to come on board as well? So it's like you're becoming producers in the sense you're creating content, at least for us at this stage, and we're also looking at how do we create engagement? How do we become more of a virtual company in addition to the skills that we already have? We're constantly researching, so it's how comfortable are we to be online when we're asking other people to be online as well. But the other thing we're also doing at this point, at least, and I think it's also happening in different countries. I know I've attended a webinar where Glenton was on and talking about, and we're briefly touched base with Kazi the other day. It's, how do we play that important role for each of our governments in helping them prepare to open the borders, or at least open meetings and trade fairs in a very safe environment? And what role do we as event managers and companies play in influencing how do we safely open so that our industry doesn't, stay too long in the hybrid or the virtual industry? So it's, playing that policy influencer role, the production role, and just constantly learning on the virtual platform. But I think it will also be interesting to see what are we doing from country to country as we push our governments to get ready for the opening up.
And actually, before I move on to the next question, anybody on listening, feel free, if you have any questions, to drop us a question in the Q&A box. Just type it in there, and we'll be able to, here shortly, be able to, make sure we start asking some of the questions, as long as you guys have questions here. And so moving on, Glenton, to partly something that Yordan said and sort of alluded to, which was, as we look at the industry, standards. We were on a call last week with India, and they've started to create some industry standards for what it will look like moving forward with this hybrid model and convention centers and certainly expos. Do you see something similar happening, there in South Africa and certainly across the continent?
Eric, so we have, and I think Yordan has alluded to the fact that from an advocacy perspective, we've been working very closely with, obviously, South African tourism, and within South African tourism, we've got the South African National Convention Bureau. So we have, over the this past weekend, and also as part of our motivation to be considered under our national lockdown level 3, we've got a set of protocols for the entire sector. And those have been aligned, obviously, with the World Health Organization, as well as a number of, whether it's ICA, UFI, AIPC. So we've been able to then condense all of those into a workable document, which we're hoping, as we make the next submission for consideration under level 3, or try and get level 2 opened up earlier, that the sector would be able to operate. And how we developed those was to consider three sort of main aspects of any activity, whether a live event or business meeting is what happens before in terms of the pre-process, what needs to take place there in terms of whether it's a registration or a health check. What would happen during the event? So should somebody then get ill or show any symptoms of COVID-19, whether the venue or the PCO, what needs to happen there, and obviously after the event as well. So we've got almost like a four-point principle approach that is taken by national government. The first is obviously health. So the protocols have to deal with all of the health issues, whether it's whether it's pre-screening, check-in, a questionnaire that needs to be filled in. The second is like, what's the impact on the economy? So when you put the motivation in, we have to answer health around the economy. The fourth area then speaks to in terms of training, and a lot of that training has to be dealt with at a venue level or at a PCO level, depending on how that's delivered. And then the final sort of pillars around equity and distribution. And then in this instance, some of the sort of conversations that will take place would be that could we then shift? So could we, if we save Q4, and the sort of first question says, look, in Perth, let's say region A has got quite a high number of active cases still. We have to then move the venue or move the event to another region. So that's the issue around equity and distribution as well. So we have to work within that, and I think every industry, if you speak to them, have to answer those four areas or four pillars. How has it done that as a sector? And I'm more than welcome to share with my colleagues on this call or anybody else who wants to have a look at our sort of event safety principles, because as I said, they have been aligned to everybody else around the world. What we have been watching quite closely, and it's about the narrative as well. A lot of our sector work is normally lumped in with tourism. And I know my colleagues, because I come from a destination marketing background, a lot of my colleagues are not normally comfortable in saying this. I always say that business events lead, tourism happens by default, for all intents and purposes. And sometimes the leisure sort of DMCs will tell me, no, it's tourism first, and then it's not that particular way from my perspective. So what we have then done is to ensure that our conversation happens within the necessarily structures that have been put into place. So for ourselves, as I said, with us working with our South African tourism colleagues, we also then work with our Department of Tourism, as well as health, and with the Department of Trade and Industry as well. Because our sector cuts across a lot of the economies that are already back and active in South Africa, which effectively means, as we've normally said, if corporate South Africa moves, then the business events sector has to move. So we're hopeful that we will come back online sooner than the 1 September timeline that's put into place. And we've been clear that that timeline is fluid. And as I said earlier, we're open to activate earlier. So we have a stringent set of protocols that have been checked, double-checked and triple-checked by everybody that needs to have them in play. So we are, as I speak right now, we are ready to activate. And a lot of the member companies or businesses would be able to adapt the protocols to their individual needs as we go along.
Yudan, you'd like to add something to that?
Yeah, I think, look, to be honest, how Africa is seen as one big country, right? So in order for us to build confidence across the world that Africa as one big country is ready to host international events, meetings and conferences and so forth, we need to start having, similar as much as possible standard and showcase and talk about as widely as possible that we are taking the right measures. If you go from one country to another, you're going to see the same minimum standards that are being implemented. And I think the more that we engage across borders and talk to each other and not have to reinvent the wheel. So like Lantern offered, and I'm definitely going to take you up on it, to say, what are some of the best practices you've put together and think will work? And then adapting that and, bringing that into Ethiopia and saying, what are some of the policies that will realistically work and what can we recommend? And then Kenya can do the same, and Rwanda and so forth. Then at least across border, we can assure each other that we have the minimum standards in place, and until the rest of the world is ready to travel beyond their comfort zone and beyond their borders, at least within Africa, we can start traveling and we can start recommending and actually going to each other's meetings and building up that confidence and showcasing that we are ready and we are capable. And in addition to the events industry, we need to go along the value chain and talk to our governments to showcase or push, at least, from the Ethiopian Airlines side, to say, what are you doing? How are you showcasing that as a connector to the continent? What are you putting in place as safety measures? Talk about it, really put the PR behind it, and really show that Africa is a continent for people to travel into. What are our airports doing? What are our airlines doing? What are our transportation companies doing? What are the hotels doing? And I think as PCOs and different event companies, we play really that pivotal role where we connect all these different players in one central area and really drive the conversations to make sure that there's an alignment along the value chain, and it's not just happening with the PCOs, and it's not just happening in the venues, but it's happening along the value chain in each country. And I think it's really time for us as different African countries, not just to talk the talk, but actually really come together and put forth like a united face on our preparedness for post-COVID in the industry.
Some very important points, especially obviously if airlines are not flying, it's kind of hard to get business travelers to any particular destination. Kezi?
Eric, just quickly before, I mean, as I said, I made a commitment, so I definitely will share the documentation immediately after this with the group, and then they obviously can share it within their networks as well. Because we have done a lot of work, and as I said, it's aligned to all of the international standards, so it's really going to cut down a lot of time for my colleagues to try and reinvent the wheel. They can actually just activate immediately.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Kezi?
Yeah, I think the reality is that the pandemic will have significant business impact, particularly on smaller businesses across different industries, and therefore the need to collaborate. I think a great response will be to begin to collaborate across the region, probably rethinking how we promote our destinations, rethinking how we align, synergize, and bring different strengths on the table to drive more business on the continent. You realize that we are at a stage of the pandemic where we are, some of our countries entering early stage, whereas we have other destinations in Europe exiting and reopening their economies. And therefore, it's necessary for DMCs, PCOs, I think even associations across the region to begin to integrate strengths and think of collaborative measures. This is not the time to go it alone, not for small businesses, not for associations. It's not the time to go it alone. It's a time to think of how to harness energies and strengths across the region.
Zuhura, I know you've been involved in a lot of those conversations as well. Anything to add to that?
Yes, we have been involved in conversations to steer us to the roadmap towards the recovery of this industry. Of course, we've been highly helped by the government in the aspect of hearing what the private sector has got to say in reference to the business losses and even how we are going way forward in reference to that. One thing that is clear and we need to know is we must remember that government need all of us to play a part in the fight against the pandemic. And we must also act and take necessary steps, that are required for us to be able to revive. It's amazing how somebody asks, when do you think we'll get back? It would actually take all of us to ensure that we can fasten the getting back. And again, another question that I got the other day was like, I hear that, we are opening up the skies and, other places in Africa have opened up the skies. And I said, wow, interesting, because if you realize, even as much as we're looking at attracting people into country and even on the future aspect of it, you cannot just say that we're opening the airports are going to be open because we've got the admin aspect. Are we looking at how is the airspace protocol, control coordination across even Africa? So hence the reason why even I liked what Jordan was saying, and of course Clinton, how we're going to work as a pact as Africa to be able to have everything actually revive back the industry. So even before we talk about aircraft, we have the admin, then we have the airport authority, who are the ones who are receiving, ensuring they're putting in regulations in place. If you're going to South Africa, How many hours would it take? How long do I need to be at the airport? It might be even longer than the time it takes me to South Africa because of a lot of things that I'm actually going to be doing, so that there is clarity that when I come from JKIA all the way to Otambo, is I am actually brought in and I don't need to go through any quarantine and I can go to my conference. So you can see how that is very clear. And of course, there comes again the airline, of course, understanding that the passenger duration, how long are they, taking care of this passenger and ensuring that they can commit that when I got in, I had no infection and I can come out, even when I'm being picked, which company is picking me up, are they looking at that before I get into the business? So you can look how it's critical that you cannot have one airline open in one area and, the airspace, you don't have control that is coordinated. So as Africa, as we rise in this, I'm happy that we can actually work in as a pact and be able to put in things that we can all look at, because we're looking at, we start off domestic, then regional, before even we can get into the international. But the best part is we know that we had our CS of tourism, Honorable Najib Balala, who has really been putting this at the front and working closely and with stakeholders, worked very closely with the Kenya Tourism Board and also the National Convention Bureau. And last week, a task force was formed that will come up with various health and protocol regulations that we are looking into right now that, have encompassed different people from the hotel keepers, the Kenya Civil Aviation across, for us to have those standards that can actually be looked into, that can help us revive the industry. So of course, as much as it's been lost and a lot that has been given in the surplus to support the industry, which of course is being handled by TFC, and which is more looking at eligibility and vetting of different companies, the tourism companies that need surplus to enable them revive the business. We are looking forward to seeing how the protocols would actually direct, because they are the ones that would actually position us better for the destination and also open us to see how we can work with Africa. And I like that particular aspect, and we're really looking forward to seeing how we can be able to revive that and work very closely with the DMCs and the PCUs as well.
Yep, sorry, we're just trying to find Harry's not able to reconnect, so he's having some internet troubles himself. So unfortunately, that is the world that we're all living in right now. I guess as we think about, and this sort of goes to the last question for everybody, opportunities. So, Kezia, let's go to you. I mean, you talked a little bit about opportunities. What do you see as the big opportunity here as people are rethinking the whole events industry, and where do you think some of those opportunities are going to lay with different people and different parts of the supply chain?
Mm-hmm. I think a great one for industry players, a low-hanging fruit here is content development and rethinking, developing content for different segments of our markets. People want to have certain key conversations. Unfortunately, I have seen over the years industry players on the continent approach our delivery from a production perspective and not necessarily from a concept development perspective. And I think that's where we all need to be heading, thinking a lot, how do we design concepts for clients? Clients right now are wondering how to engage. And a great way to respond to that need is to move towards developing concepts that meet that need, that allow them to engage with different pockets of their audience. But then also secondly, learning. I think across the industry, we need a reskilling that allows us to meet the challenges that we now find ourselves in. We've talked previously, I know I have been engaged a lot previously on the issue of skills development on the continent for MICE. Because we are still at a very low level in Kenya now. We only have had one university teaching conventional management, and I think it's the only one in East and Central Africa. But now we find ourselves with a skills gap. How do we address, even virtual conferencing, how many companies of the continent have capabilities for that? And we know that for us to have a full recovery and a reopening, we need to enhance confidence. Our international clients, for business to begin flowing, we need to instill confidence. Skills is one of the greatest ways to instill confidence in our clients, that we have capabilities, capacity to get us reopening. So skilling is an opportunity that we need to go to. We've tried definitely to engage with academia on retooling for the 21st century. Now we have almost an entire new century within the century. We need to fast track our skills development for the industry, for a lot more people to be able to engage with issues as they are right now. Even as we talk about virtual events, there are different components within the virtual. It's not just the utilization of a platform, like this, like Zoom or the different other platforms. There are different, actually, career opportunities out of virtual event management itself. So I see a need for upscaling for the entire industry. Thinking through skills development, there is now the issue of new lines like sustainability, where we've been practicing for the last 3-4 years. We now see the need of sustainability consultants for the industry, because now is a time where safety and health becomes a critical issue for the industry, whereas we utilize different matrices to determine the attractiveness of a destination. Right now, health and safety is a critical component, and we need to be able to do audits. We may have requirements from government to conduct prevent audits. Are we going to be inviting capabilities from outside of the industry, or are we going to develop those skills inside of the industry to conduct sustainability audits pre and post events? Opportunities in data management for the industry, because we now need to track. The tracking becomes a core responsibility for PCOs and event organizers. It goes beyond patching together an event like we've seen before. It goes to issues of data management, skills in technology handling, skills in designing and developing concepts, and then also M&E, monitoring and evaluation, because right now, value for money, we have very little liquidity across the markets on the continent and even beyond. So every shilling counts for sponsors, for businesses. So the monitoring and evaluation component of event management becomes major. It becomes critical, being able to develop reporting that allows customers to know how best to engage with their audiences. I definitely see those as the nearest opportunities right now. And maybe also rethinking different challenges, like for trade shows. How do we get that started? I talked about activations. There are some sub-segments of our industry that are very heavy on face-to-face. We know that for business to happen, there's an element of trust that develops when you have a face-to-face interaction. So a lot of companies want to get back to face-to-face so that we can begin to get business transactions happening, which will eventually impact on liquidity on the continent.
Absolutely. Everybody looks forward to being able to get in front of other folks. Yoda?
I wanted to add on what Kezi said, and also maybe provide an opportunity for African associations within the events industry to play a bigger role when it comes to monitoring and evaluation, rather than push it back on the government or bringing in external consultants. Maybe that's where our associations can play a bigger role and actually be, play that really important connector between understanding what the local capacities are, and also, reskilling within our associations team members to say, well, now this part is going to be doing the matrix analysis on the safety measures for each event. So I think let's not leave that opportunity on the table for outside parties to play it, but rather bring it back into the association and help them play an important role as they face with outsiders in the government.
The industry experience is extremely important to putting those together properly, for sure. Before we wrap up, first of all, again, we've been talking about virtual. EventBank obviously is a technology company in this space. Again, over the last few months, we ourselves have been hard at work trying to make sure that our platform can meet the needs of different kinds of organizations around the continent, associations in terms of launching our community product, which you saw at the beginning of our webinar today. And we've also recently launched our webinar engagement solution, which is another tool that we launched to help bring the engagement element a little bit beyond what most platforms are contributing. We're just going to do a quick video to preview some of that for you all. So, EventBank has presence in both South Africa and Kenya with our teams that, we put on the ground last year. So please feel free to reach out to us, and in any way we can help any of the organizations here, we're happy to do so. I'd like to thank our panelists. Thank you everybody from across the continent, and appreciate everybody's time. We will distribute, some white paper information after this, summarizing some of the panelists' comments today, and look forward to also making sure, EventBank, as much as everybody here on the panel, is helping the industry to move forward. Thank you again, Glenton, Kezi, Zuhura, and Yodan, and Harry. We appreciate everybody's time, and forward to hopefully to see everybody soon in person.
Thank you.
Bye.
Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Bye-bye.